What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heaven, New York, calling from the Alto again, and this time we return with Tim of the Almighty Striker. I believe this is round 5, 6, 7. Who's counting, right?
Heavy metal, yeah, that's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, too, man. I believe the last time we spoke was on the Holy Grail tour, which was a great time. But I remember interviewing you guys on the Unleash the Archers tour and the Dark Tranquility tour. We've gone back quite a bit, and you guys have come a long way. I'm really happy for you guys.
Thanks, yeah.
So with this new album, Ultrapower, absolutely kick-ass. Is this just sort of, would you consider this just sort of like the continuation or the sequel to Play to Win in a way, or was this meant to sort of be like a new beginning for Stryker?
Almost like a bit of both, but I'd probably lean towards a new beginning. We're sort of constantly writing music, so we sort of released like some singles over COVID, if you will. So in that sense, the band is like always running, it's like a car that you never turn off.
Yeah.
But, the difference between when we spoke last, with the Holy Grail tour, for example, we have new drummer, new guitar player, new bass, or no, wait, Pete's still here. But it's practically a new band, a lot of new members. And then we also took a different approach on Play to Win. We recorded it ourselves, produced it ourselves, did everything, and then sent it out to get mixed and mastered. Whereas on this one, we went to Josh Schroeder, who produces bands like Lorna Shore. So, super modern, super heavy shit. And we've been self-recording our albums for the last 3 albums. And so with this one, we really wanted to sort of make a change in direction, I guess, a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's still a Stryker record. It still sounds like Stryker. I think we really focused on sort of what the core element of the band was. And we really decided that, the main thing that people resonate with for Stryker is just having fun. And that's who we are. We all like to have fun. And that's why we all play music, is we just like having fun. So on this album, we really just focused on, are the songs fun? And that's it. And I think on previous albums, you're trying to be like, oh, is this like artistic? Is this, do we have a good song that's a good fit for, I think we're maybe trying to like branch out and show that we could, use clean guitars and whatever, which is fine. I like Play to Win a lot, but I think on this album, we're just like, what's the most fun thing we can do? And that's just, banger riffs, knuckle dragging,
Yeah.
just have as much fun as possible.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that too, because while I could tell from both the music in itself and seeing you guys play countless times now that you guys have a lot of fun in what you do. It's like the fun is part of the formula, if you will. But like the music, the technical proficiency that's demonstrated in a Stryker album is also very, very impressive. So like when it comes to that songwriting, like are you almost kind of like, is there a moment where like you kind of have to put the fun aside to really focus on composition and arrangement and all that?
I would say sort of. At the end of the day, it's always just fun. And, we've all been playing our instruments, and everybody in the band at this point has been a band leader and a main songwriter for their past bands. So everybody is pretty, everybody has written albums worth of material. Everybody has had to, write all the different instruments, blah, blah, blah. So we're all pretty well experienced, and a lot of songwriting stuff just sort of comes naturally to us. And, we all grew up on shred stuff. So being technically proficient is sort of just baked into whatever we do. Certainly there's a couple like, I would say challenging riffs or solos or whatever, but at the end of the day, we just kind of wrote what was fun, and then whatever flows through that became part of the song. Obviously, there's a lot of, I would call it like going through and dotting your I's, crossing your T's, making sure certain things are in line, making sure, certain chords line up better, things like that. I think, we go, after we write the song, we kind of go back through and go, oh, okay, what are the little things that we need to fix up to make it more, musically logical, I guess you could say. And then we'll fix those things up because sometimes, maybe, there's some like music nerd bullshit that you need to stuff into your song to make it work a little better. Like maybe you need a pivot chord or a key change somewhere, something like that to make it flow a little bit better. And after we're happy with songs, then we'll go back and fix those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well,
but for the most part, it's just focus on the fun. Is this a fun song? Is this a fun riff? Okay, cool. Moving on.
Well, with Josh Schroeder working with Lorna Shore, I was worried he'd beat the fun out of you, and Stryker would turn into deathcore. Your logo would be unreadable, and all that shit.
Yeah. No, he was great to work with, and he was. It was fun because he told us. I don't know if this is just producer smoke that they blow up everyone's ass, but he's like, "Oh man, this has got to be one of my top 3 most favorite albums I've ever worked on." So I don't know. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. Maybe he's just trying to be nice. But it was a lot of fun to work with him, and I think he was excited because I think a lot of producers and just people in the music industry in general really are excited when there's opportunities to do something a little bit more outside the box that people put them in. So, I mean, obviously with Josh Schroeder working with Lorna Shore and like Pella and all these other super heavy bands, like Signs of the Swarm, for example, it's just like, people see that name and just, oh, he can only do super brutal deathcore. And then, when we came, he's like, oh, this is great. I grew up on this shit. And, he has a great history with more melodic music. Like he knows a lot of people, like he got us Bootsy Collins and New Kids on the Block's sax player who played on one of our songs. So, I mean, he has a great breadth of knowledge and a great network that isn't necessarily, that all brutal. It's, so I think he was pretty happy to have an opportunity to work on something that sounded a little different.
Yeah. And I think it's great where you guys kind of were able to combine your own worlds into one sort of, to make that one sort of concoction. Is that where maybe like the name Ultrapower came from? Because I really do think like I love it when an album title, it sounds exactly what it says in the title. You know what I mean? This album feels ultra powerful. So
yeah, the Ultrapower was the lyric in one of the songs, Ready for Anything, and we just kind of were like, oh yeah, that's funny. Let's it's just fun. It's just a fun thing. Let's just call it Ultrapower, And I just kind of like, yeah, that's good, and it kind of just sums up the ethos behind the album, where it's just focus on fun. The album is it's a little bit tongue in cheek. It's a little, it's fun, but it's also, we're not taking it too serious. And I think with Ultrapower, the logo or the cover art, stuff like that, we're just like. It's fun. You just look at it and you go, what the hell is this? This looks fun. And that's just what we're focusing on. So, I mean, it comes down to not just the music, but it's, how do we look? What is the album cover? What's the album title? Stuff like that. So everything that we've been doing on this album is just focus on fun. Is the name fun? Is the cover art fun? All that stuff. So
how does that make you stand out when you're touring with a band like Dark Tranquillity and they have a song like Misery's Crown?
Yeah, well, that's one thing that we really noticed. I mean, sort of over the COVID break, if you will, the we're just sort of taking a look at all the different bands and history of metal, basically, and like everybody out there these days is all super grim. Everybody's wearing, corpse paint, or they're just like LARPing. So it's like, okay, either you can LARP as an elf or as a dwarf or a dragon or whatever with some kind of fantasy bullshit, or you can be like super grim and dark and wear like evil masks and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, we're not either of those things. And it, to us, it seemed as though there wasn't any artists out there that were, I mean, every band that we play with has fun, but they're not projecting fun. You know, they're not projecting that they're having fun, especially in, you know, things like song titles or whatever. So for us, we're like, hey, that's a niche that we're sort of already filling. Why don't we just lean into that a little bit more? And that'll, you know, at the end of the day, these days, the music industry, it's just the attention economy. That's all that matters, is can you get someone's attention for a, you know, a 3-second TikTok? And so for us, we just really wanted something to focus on, something that was a little bit more unique to sort of help us stand out from the pack a little bit. Because, like I said, there's just so many. Everybody's LARPing as something. Why don't we LARP as, you know, cool dudes who we thought would be cool when we were growing up in you know, second, third grade? Somebody in the WWF in 1991 or something, or the American Gladiators. So that's what that's our LARP. Instead of a dragon, we're LARPing as wrestlers.
Well, what I gotta say is what I think is what is cool, because like that whole sort of fun thing is like, for instance, I have a lot of fun when I listen to King Diamond, but like his music is evil as hell. You know, Back in Black, which, you know, we've heard that song at every bar mitzvah, every wedding, every, you know, celebration, but that album is a tribute to Bon Scott after he passed. So it's interesting on how like the darkness and fun and how the way it's portrayed, like you have bands that are like very literal with it, like Steel Panther, for example, but then you have bands that are kind of like fun by accident.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we did a tour with Steel Panther right before we did the tour with Holy Grail when we spoke last. And I mean, watching those guys and being on tour with them, it was like, oh, this is it. You know, sort of, I wouldn't really call it an aha moment, but we were like, wow, we want to be like those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily, you know, steal their whole shtick, but they're having fun up on stage. They have fun when they're writing their music. The audience is there to have fun. And I think it's one of the really neat things about Steel Panther is that metalheads love them, and then just like normal people like them.
Yeah.
You know, like if you go to a Steel Panther show, there's just a bunch of normal people there in addition to metalheads.
Yeah.
It's just people looking to have fun. And you know, I remember, because I saw them like 12, 13 years ago, and they were still I think they had their first album out, but they had they were still mostly doing like casinos in LA and Vegas, and I saw them in Vegas, and I was like, man, this is fucking amazing. Like, it's so much fun, because they're just playing to a general audience in Vegas, right? It's just
They're like a
audience,
satire.
basically.
I feel like what I love about Steel Panther is like they are a musical version of the Hard Times, the satire side.
Yeah. So I mean, for us, we're like, okay, well, you know, obviously people just, I mean, at the end of the day, when you go to a live show, that's what you're there for. You want to have fun, hang out with your friends, headbang, you know, whatever. So there's so many bands out there that are like, oh yeah, you gotta fucking read this novel before you come to the show, so you can get the so you can understand the deep lyrics, and why we're dressed up as dragons and elves, and why my sword's name is whatever. And it's just like, man, nobody cares. I just want to drink beer and run around. So that's what we're about. Because that's the gist of it.
Yeah, but I feel like Stryker has. I call you guys 70K metal, because when you were on 70,000 Tons of Metal, you had like, you could have a band that sounded old school like that. Like, look, I thought the Dark Tranquility tour was genius. I thought, like, you know, playing with bands like on 70K were cool. But I could see you on a tour with a Corpaclani or an Elevite, and then I could also see you on like the Motley Crue tour. I think you kind of had the best of both worlds with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have 7 albums now, so we have a lot of different music to pick from. And then on top of that, I think we've been, you know, fairly diverse. We've always been sort of a thrash, speed, heavy, traditional kind of metal. Like, we sort of, in I'd say a more melodic pocket. But that being said, if we have to play with heavier bands, we got a ton of really heavy, heavy thrash stuff. And I mean, where we grew up in Edmonton, it was basically 99% death metal or black metal. So, I mean, we always grew up just playing in between black metal, death metal, and just like no harsh vocals. Certainly when we were growing up, we were like one of the only bands with clean vocals.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, you're playing guitar solos too? It's just like complete outlier. But I mean, we're so used to it that it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're playing with tech death band today. Why don't we play some heavier songs or some more technical stuff? And then nowadays, now we have 7 albums. It's like, okay, if we were going to go on tour with the Motley Crue, we'd probably pick some of our more melodic stuff that would work better with their crowd. And then it's like, maybe let's pretend we got on a tour with someone like Archspire. It's like, okay, well, time to bust out the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So it's nice that we have that diversity at this point. We have a lot of lighter fare, and then we also have a lot of super heavy stuff. So
yeah,
usually when we play live, we kind of try to mix it up. But
I remember when I interviewed you on the Unleash the Archers tour with and we were talking about Archspire, and I was mentioning how great their bass player is and stuff, and you were like, well, think about what you'd be doing if it was guitar. Like,
yeah.
I just remember that joke. And the final question I actually wanted to ask you is so Stryker has an important place in Heavy New York history, at least for me, is because with Heavy New York, when we started doing interviews, I was reaching out on certain bands. You were the first band that I got introduced to from doing interviews. Like, I didn't hear of Stryker. So I didn't first hear of you guys until you were doing the self-titled run on the Dark Tranquility tour. So Stryker's always been sentimental to me in that regard. So then I went back and listened to Stand in the Fire, Armed to the Teeth, Eyes of the Night. This year marks 10 years of City of Gold. And I just wanted to give like a quick nostalgia or down memory lane that. What was the sort of thought process behind the making of your third album? Because with Eyes in the Night and Armed to the Teeth being under your belt already, you had City of Gold, which is awesome. And then I felt like with Stand in the Fire, self-titled onwards, you really were able to kind of like, I feel like almost kind of found your niche, if that's the best way of putting it.
Yeah, well, by the third album, we'd sort of matured a little bit, I guess you could say. And the third album sort of came together by we really wanted to be a lot heavier and more modern sounding. I think when with the recording of Armed to the Teeth and Eyes in the Night, it was very much, hey, we want to be like an 80s throwback kind of thing with the 80s sound everywhere. And then, at the end of the day, I mean, objectively speaking, 80s mixing and mastering technology and processes, they just literally sound bad compared to modern mixes. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I think we've always been sort of snobs for production quality. So like, for example, a band like Nickelback, I don't really like their music, but I really, really like their production, and I can really respect that their process and what they've achieved and stuff like that. And we were just like, we want an album that sounds good, like objectively sounds good. So, you put it on and it's like, oh, wow, this is a really good mix. It's really modern. It, sort of stands the test of time. And I don't think when we went into it, we wanted to record an album where someone wasn't like, oh, this is straight from the 80s, I think with Armed to the Teeth and Eyes of the Night, people would put that on, oh, is this an actual 80s band that I never heard of? And with City of Gold and moving forward, we're like, no, we want to be modern, cutting edge, leave all the other bands in the dust, super new, super modern. So that's why we went to Frederick Nordstrom. Nordstrom is, all the melodic Swedish death metal bands, Arch Enemy, Dark Tranquility, you name it, he's done it. So that's why we went to him. And yeah, we just wanted to do something new, fresh, and I think a lot heavier compared to Armed to the Teeth. So there's, some heavy stuff on there.
I really appreciate you saying that about the 80s stuff because I'm going to be honest with you right now. I love 80s metal. I love the 80s stuff, whether it would be Maiden, Priest, 70s, 80s stuff. Like, I love all that stuff. But I will not listen to it regularly like I listen to a lot of the bands I grew up with, mainly because of that
Yeah.
production. Now, live is another story. I will, even if I'm not a fan of the band, to see one of those 80s bands live, the crisp sound of their live presence or whatever, and obviously you credit that to the sound engineer too and whatnot, it's fucking amazing. I love that shit live. So it's so good to hear you mention that because some people would say, oh, you're not really into the 80s, you don't have respect for. No, it's just like, I'm sorry. Like, the stuff that I grew up with, being born in 93, is just better produced. So therefore, it's easier to listen to. And let's be real, all the people who grew up with that stuff, you don't think that if they had those platforms and those abilities to make that stuff sound as crisp, they would not have utilized it? Like,
Yeah.
like
Sure.
they were working with what they had at the time. It's not like we're faulting the producer or the band for sounding that way. It's just they were working with what they got at the time. And
Yeah, for sure.
so, like, I'm really glad to hear you mention that because I think it is getting a little tiresome when people say that, like, oh, you don't respect the 80s. Why are so many 80s bands releasing remixed versions of their albums?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think that's another reason why there's sort of an appetite for artists these days that are doing like cover projects. Like there's that, what is it, Bullfrog or something?
Yeah.
And he just does covers, or there's a ton of bands that they just pump out a lot of covers. And I mean, we do a fair amount of covers too, like with crowdfunding or do contests, and we just say, hey, pick a fucking song. And on City of Gold, like we did a cover of 2 Minutes to Midnight as one of the bonus tracks. And I mean, we got so many comments where people were like, wow, it's so amazing. And we literally just, we didn't really do anything. We just re-recorded the song in a modern take. At the time, we were doing like an Iron Maiden tribute act thing on the side, and we wanted to sort of use that as like a business card, if you will. Be like, hey, look how authentic we are.
Yeah.
So we just really wanted to have an authentic, like we tried to do the solos exactly the same, all the guitars, bass, whatever, just have it the same, but with the modern mix. And it's just like, wow, this sounds a million times better.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Iron Maiden are, they're goated. They're
Of course,
great,
of course.
amazing,
But you
truly, timeless recording. But the mixing and mastering just cannot compare to a modern mix and master.
Well, I think it's a good example of bands that got huge from a cover. Like, take the Ataris, right? They're famous for that Boys of Summer cover. Now,
Yeah.
that was a good song on the original artist. But it goes to show how, I can't even remember who the original artist was, but you listen to that original cover. Sure, the arrangement and the song structure, the lyrics and everything, it's a great song. But with the production and the twist that the Ataris put on it, take another great cover, the Zombie cover that Bad Wolves did. That original
Yeah.
song, not to disrespect the Cranberries or Dolores, but the guitar riffs in there are kind of a little bit more on the muffled side. I think that there could have been a little bit more studio magic utilized at that time. But, like, I think but when they reinvented it, it brought the production that maybe people have longed for it. So, like, I think in the end, like, again, it's not criminal to say that, like, a band like Killswitch Engage or a band like I don't know, Power Trips, Nightmare Logic, thrash. That is a better
Yeah.
produced thrash album than Kill 'Em All. Is it a better album?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Nothing is better than Seek and Destroy and the Four Horsemen and Whiplash and whatnot. But then again, better produced Nightmare Logic, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Like you just can't compare the two. It's kind of like a black and white movie and a new modern digital movie.
Yeah, I think in the end, bringing new life to that with Studio Magic is only going to make things better. And before we go off more on this tangent, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Just with the release of Ultrapower, kick-ass album, what else could we be expecting from Stryker in the near future, if you're allowed to say at this moment?
Yeah, well, we have a show announced in Chicago on May 3rd. That's Legions of Metal Festival. And then we'll be announcing a tour to go around with it, hopefully West Coast, North America. And then we also have Prog Power, which is announced in September. And again, we'll be touring North America to support that. So I hope everybody across North America keeps their eyes peeled for Striker tour announcements.
Hell yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Striker. Be sure to pick up Ultrapower. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.
Hell yeah.